Imagine trying to win a modern war with plywood, glue, and pure audacity. Imagine sending a bomber into the teeth of enemy territory with no defensive guns at all, and watching it come home, again and again, while faster, proper fighters failed to catch it. If that sounds like a tall tale, keep listening. Because today, you and I are diving into the unlikely legend of a wooden aircraft that outpaced doubters and dogfights alike, rewrote the playbook, and left its enemies furious enough to imitate it. By the time we reach the end, you'll know why this story still stings for the people who swore it could never work. Let's spool back to the early years of the Second World War. Everybody is betting big on metal, thick skins, heavy turrets, bristling guns. Bombers are supposed to be flying fortresses, not ballerinas. And yet, in those brutal first years, the big, slow heavies are getting carved up. Armor helps. Until it doesn't. Escorts help. Until weather, range, or timing means they aren't there. Into this chaos steps a designer with the nerve to say, what if we fight the opposite war? No guns, no armor, minimum drag, maximum speed. Survive not by soaking up punishment, but by never being where the bullets are. That designer is Sir Geoffrey de Havilland. His pitch? A fast, unarmed bomber built mostly out of wood. Wood. In an age obsessed with aluminum and steel, he proposes spruce, birch, and balsa. Materials more at home in a cabinet maker's shop than an aircraft factory. The government's reaction is exactly what you think. Thanks, but no thanks. So de Havilland does something that separates dreamers from history makers. He builds it anyway. He leans on his own company, pulls in skilled craftsmen who know their way around veneers and glues, and carries on. Under the watch of a crucial ally in uniform, Air Marshal Wilfred Freeman, who believes enough to keep the lights on when skeptics want the plug pulled. Now, before you roll your eyes at the word wood, remember what wartime Britain looks like. Metal is precious. Kitchen pots, garden gates, and railings are getting fed to the furnaces. Wood, on the other hand, is plentiful, familiar, and doesn't set off every radar and resource alarm in the country. Better yet, it allows quick, distributed production. You can shape it, mold it, and laminate it in places that don't look anything like a typical aircraft plant. Furniture makers, coach builders, even piano shops. Suddenly they're part of the war effort in a very literal way. And there's a bonus few people talk about. If you ditch over the channel on the way home, timber floats long enough to tilt the odds a little in your favor. The prototype is born in semi-secrecy, assembled like a sculpture in layered halves, thin veneers laminated into sleek curves, two mirror shells that meet on a centerline seam. No rivet heads to punish the airflow, no bumps or bulges unless absolutely necessary. Then comes the day that turns Snickers into silence. First flight. The date is late 1940. The airplane leaps into the air, and it is fast. Not pretty quick for a bomber. Fast, period. Fast enough that when it lines up against the latest Spitfire in service and the betting men assume the wooden upstart will eat contrails, they end up watching. The supposed underdogs sprint away. Speed is no longer a theory. It is a grinning reality in RAF roundels. With performance like that, the unarmed bomber gets its production nod and a nickname that sticks. The Wooden Wonder. The pilots who strap it on talk about a sensation that's more sports car than lorry. Long legs, light touch, and power that just keeps coming. And speaking of power, look under the cowlings. Each nacelle hides a member of the Rolls-Royce Merlin family, the same bloodline that pushes Spitfires and big four-engined heavies. Twin Merlins mean a combined punch of roughly 3,000 horsepower. Put that behind the cleanest wooden skin you can laminate, and you're looking at level flight speeds around 400 miles per hour, enough to embarrass a lot of contemporary fighters, never mind lumbering bombers. Of course, speed is only half the promise. The other half is usefulness. An aircraft that runs like a thief is great. An aircraft that runs like a thief while carrying a serious haul is transformative. Open the bay and you find space for a meaningful bomb load. 2,000 pounds on long legs, and on shorter dashes, double it. Yes, you heard that right. The same cookie, a massive 4,000-pound blast bomb that normally rides in the belly of big, four-engine bruisers can fit inside this slender, two-man racer. Now imagine what that means for tactics. Instead of lumbering formations escorted by squadrons of fighters, you can send a handful of sleek, low-flying sprinters to hit something valuable and be gone before the enemy has finished their first radio call. Production becomes a kind of national handcraft project. With the right jigs and molds, shops that once made dining tables are turning out precision components. The surface finish is almost comically smooth compared to riveted metal. Another little gift to the gods of speed. At the peak, these aircraft roll off the line with a regularity that would make any planner smile, especially considering the bombs falling on British cities and the constraints gnawing at every supply chain. But speed and bombs aren't the only trick up this machine's sleeve. The design is so clean that engineers start asking, what if we add teeth? And they don't think small. They rework the nose to carry serious forward-firing firepower. A pack of Hispano 20mm cannons nestled in the lower fuselage, with rifle-caliber Brownings stacked above, instead of splitting guns across wings and hoping to stitch a target at exactly the right convergence distance. Everything is clustered on the center line. Point, squeeze, and let physics do the rest. Pilots describe the effect with a mix of awe and glee, a torrent of shells and bullets pouring straight ahead, the kind of concentrated burst that turns locomotives into scrap and makes airfield crews dive for cover. The speed penalty? Barely a handful of miles per hour. That's the advantage of a platform engineered around drag reduction from day one. So how does this thing fight? At first, quietly, camera in the bay, blue paint on the skin, slicing high over enemy territory to photograph everything the planners need to see. A recon machine that can go where it wants and run if challenged is a gift you don't refuse. Those images, bridges, factories, rail yards, will become coordinates for pain later. Then come the bolder experiments. Daylight. Low-level strikes flown so close to the trees you can count leaves at the wingtips. Radar coverage? Slip underneath it. Flak belts? Skim past them. The idea is brutally simple. A small team, flying very fast and very low, hits something essential and is back over the water before most defenders know what they're chasing. And here's a moment I want you to weigh in on in the comments. Is this the most counterintuitive success of the war? An unarmed bomber proving that speed beats guns? Or do you think something else deserves that crown? I'm genuinely curious which mission or machine you'd nominate. So drop your pick and why. I'll be reading. Now, as the aircraft proliferates, the enemy upgrades too. Germany fields fighters with scary reputations, machines that have already given Allied aces very bad days. But reputations don't bend aerodynamics. More than once, a pair of hot new interceptors dive on the wooden bombers, only to watch their quarry shove the throttles forward and go. Imagine sitting in a cutting-edge fighter and realizing the bomber you're supposed to kill is walking away from you in level flight. That kind of humiliation doesn't just dent morale, it scrambles strategy. Do you assign your best pilots to chase these ghosts? Do you stretch radar nets and hope timing is perfect? All the while, the wooden raiders keep picking moments and targets that leave you reacting instead of dictating terms. The versatility keeps multiplying. Night operations? Absolutely. You can tune this airframe into a night fighter that stalks returning enemy bombers and their escorts, slipping into the circuit when they're low, slow, and vulnerable. Maritime strike? Load rockets under the wings. 8 stubby cylinders that, when loosed in a ripple, turn a coastal convoy into a mess of splashes and fire. See a U-boat? Swap in depth charges and make a very loud, very wet argument. And then there's the variant that seems almost like a dare. Refit the nose with a monstrous, semi-automatic 57mm gun, a weapon originally designed for tank killing. Hooked up to a feed system and a trigger, one hit from that, and a submarine's day gets real short, real fast. It's not just bombs and bullets, either. The bay can carry urgent cargo when speed matters more than capacity. Even a passenger if that passenger happens to be desperately important. Picture it. A scientist whose brain the Allies really want to keep away from German hands, tucked into the dark belly of a wooden racer and whisked out under cover of oxygen and altitude. The ride isn't comfortable. This isn't a passenger jet, but it is fast, and it is quiet in all the ways that matter. If you know that story, you know how close it came to ending badly, and how a quick-thinking pilot turned an equipment failure into a survivable descent. By now, the legend is operating on 2 fronts: the raw numbers of missions flown and the psychological cut each one delivers. It isn't just about how many tons of bombs drop. It's about where and when. The aircraft seems to delight in timing, showing up on days when symbolism matters, at hours designed to interrupt speeches and strain credibility. Imagine planning your grand broadcast to a nation under arms, only to hear sirens and feel walls shake at the exact moment your microphone goes live. Imagine promising your capital is safe, and then hearing bombs thump in daylight. The physical damage from small, precision raids is measured in bricks and glass. The political damage is measured in red faces and furious orders. If you were sitting in the German high command, what would you try next? Would you design a match, a twin-engine speedster of your own, even stealing the concept down to the adhesives? Would you strap an exotic boost system to your fastest fighters, hoping a short burst is enough to cut off a wooden sprint? Or would you gamble on brand new technology, pinning your hopes on rockets and jets that rewrite the speed curve entirely? Drop your strategist hat in the comments. How would you counter a foe you can't pin down? Meanwhile, the wooden wonder keeps doing what it does best, forcing the other side to react. Even when truly cutting-edge enemy fighters appear, the numbers aren't there to blanket the sky, and the timing windows remain razor-thin. Catching a sprinting intruder still requires being in the right place at the right second. Miss that, and most do. And you're left staring at empty air and listening to another report about a bombed HQ, a shredded train, a burning ship. With all this brilliance, here's a question that nags at people who discover the story late. Why wasn't this airplane built in even greater numbers? Why didn't it become the centerpiece of everything? The answers are messy and very wartime. Engine supply is finite, and those beautiful Merlins are wanted everywhere, by frontline fighters, by the big heavies hauling entire factories' worth of ordnance, by escorts sweeping the skies in daylight. Then there are climate issues. Take a wooden, glue-bonded structure into hot, humid theaters, and sometimes joints misbehave, skins ripple, and maintenance becomes a headache. Doctrine plays a part too. Certain commands are committed, philosophically and logistically, to mass night bombing. A steel hammer swung again and again. A scalpel, even a dazzling, fast scalpel, doesn't replace a hammer in a doctrine built around hammers. And yet, mission after mission, the scalpel proves its worth. Precision when collateral damage must be minimized, speed when surprise is the only shield, flexibility when today's target is a factory and tomorrow's is a prison wall. It becomes the Swiss Army knife hanging from the RAF's belt. Never the only tool, but always the one you're glad to reach for when the job is awkward, urgent, or politically sensitive. If you love the engineering side of this as much as I do, consider the elegance at work here. A sandwich of veneers and glue gives you a stiff, smooth shell. Clean surfaces / drag. Distributed manufacturing pulls a whole nation's craftsmen into the fight. Concentrated nose armament solves the convergence problem without adding draggy pods and pylons. Twin Merlins turn a light airframe into a bullet. It's a masterclass in aligning every design choice around one ruthless goal: speed as survival. So, here's something I want you to chew on until we hit the crescendo later. Is speed the most underrated form of armor in the Second World War? Or is it simply the most misunderstood? Tell me what you think, and while you're at it, name the aircraft you believe best embodies that idea. Was it this one, a pure interceptor, or something else entirely? And keep your seatbelt fastened, because the most audacious chapters of this saga are still ahead. The daylight taunts that rattled the enemy's pride. The surgical strikes that cracked open walls no one thought could fall. The copycat projects that tried to chase a ghost and paid a heavy price for the attempt. Picture a flight so low. The North Sea salt flexed the windscreen. Two men in a cockpit of varnished wood, throttle levers hard forward, skimming under the radar lobe like thieves hugging a hedge. Ahead, a Gestapo headquarters, thick walls, thicker arrogance. The plan is elegance under stress. Arrive together, pop up over rooftops, plant bombs where masonry meets morale, and vanish along the same knife-edge ribbon of air you rode in on. One aircraft doesn't make it back, the others do, and the message is unmistakable. There is nowhere too far when your shield is speed and your sword is precision. If that sort of low-level daredevilry makes your palms sweat, tell me in the comments. Would you have strapped in for that run? But that was the trailer. The feature came when the wooden interloper decided to bomb pride, not just property. Mark the calendar. 10 years to the day after a dictator's rise. The enemy's capital dresses itself in banners and speeches, eager to broadcast invincibility. Right on cue. Engine noise threads through the midday air. Not a massed armada, just a few audacious visitors. Bomb doors open. The broadcasting schedule explodes, and every grand promise about safety collapses in echoing stairwells. Hours later, another speech, another interruption, another reminder that no microphone, no marble office, no propaganda schedule is safe from a fast shadow on the deck. The physical damage? Measured in broken glass and cracked plaster. The psychological bruise? You could see it in the clenched jaws and strained voices for weeks. Now imagine being a German fighter pilot that afternoon, strapped into the butcher bird that had been chewing up Allied legends. You're higher, diving, confident, until the supposed prey levels out, the throttles go up, and your target starts walking away. No trick, no cloud to hide in. Just clean aerodynamics and Merlins chewing through air like saws through pine. One pass denied, another squandered, and then you're out of position, watching contrails that aren't yours draw lines to the horizon. If you've ever had a rival you just couldn't catch, you know that sinking feeling. Drop your own. I almost had them stories below. Let's see who else has chased a ghost. From the start, the airplane wore disguises as easily as it wore paint. Recon variants in soft blue ranged over occupied territory, cameras clicking, bringing home the raw arithmetic of war. Where the rails converge, which bridges matter, which rooftops hide something worth a bomb bay full of attention. Planners passed those photos hand to hand like contraband, sketching raids that would have been impossible blind. And if an interceptor popped up uninvited, the camera ship didn't argue. It simply left. Then the gloves came off. Engineers stuffed the nose with a centerline battery, cannon shells and rifle caliber rounds pouring from one convergent point like a metal fire hose. The effect on soft targets was obscene. Trains that had bullied landscapes for a decade suddenly looked fragile. Trucks disintegrated. Airfields, so smug in daylight, found themselves cratered and stitched before sirens finished their first wail. Best of all, the clustered armament solved a problem that had plagued wing guns since the dawn of deflection shooting. No need to pick a magic convergence range. Wherever the pilot aimed, punishment arrived. Nightfall didn't slow the mischief. Intruder crews orbited near enemy bases, patient and predatory, waiting for returning bombers and fighters to queue up for landing. Low, slow, lights on. That's when even the proudest machine is just an outline on a vulnerable glide path. A slashing pass, muzzle flashes like camera bulbs, and suddenly the runway was a scrapyard lit by emergency flares. How would you have redesigned your base defenses to stop that? Write your fix in the comments. Searchlights? Flak curtains? Decoy circuits? Over water, the airplane reinvented itself again. 8 stubby rockets slung beneath the wings turned the estuaries and coastal lanes into ambush country. One ripple, 8 plumes, and a merchantman's day became smoke and angled decks. Catch a submarine? The bomb bay could sling depth charges with unpleasant accuracy. And then there was the variant that makes people blink even now. The big stick version with a feed-assisted 57mm gun jutting like a spear from its nose. One hit from that, and a pressure hull learned a new definition of the word leak. The crews joked about hunting armor with a gentleman's dueling pistol. The results were far from funny. Speed didn't just carry bombs. Sometimes it carried people whose minds mattered more than any filing cabinet. Picture a scientist wedged into the bay, swaddled in cold and oxygen tubing, riding out under the stars while the pilot nurses the throttles and glances at gauges. The trip is supposed to be uneventful, silent, fast, routine in the way that only a handful of wartime flights ever are. But oxygen systems aren't romantic. They're fussy. When his mask misbehaves and consciousness fades, the pilot notices, banks, and chases thicker air, trading altitude for a living passenger. There's a reason legends stick. It isn't just the machine. It's the choices made in the cockpit when a checklist turns into a heartbeat. And then, the raid that feels like fiction until you meet the people it freed. The target isn't a factory or a bridge. It's a prison where resistance fighters wait for a dawn that won't include breakfast. The plan is surgical. Walls, guard blocks, timing, and precision measured in seconds and bricks. Weather tries to cancel the show, the crews go anyway, hedge hopping through cloud and sleet. When the bombs hit, They strike not the cell blocks but the barriers that keep hope bottled up. Sirens, shouts, splinters, chaos with a purpose. Many run. Some make it. Two of the attackers don't come home. The film from onboard cameras makes propaganda reels later, but it's the absence of names on morning execution lists that counts. Predictably, the enemy hunts for a counter. First attempt. Build your own fast twin. Copy the concept down to the adhesives. Park it in factories and promise squadrons. But wars are unkind to miracles of supply. When the specialized glue plant turns into a smoking ruin, chemistry gets replaced by improvisation. Test flights end in splinters. A handful of airframes limp into service, never matching the original's devil's bargain of speed, range, and reliability. Second attempt. Bolt exotic boost systems on a frontline fighters. Inject bottled oxygen at altitude, and pray the numbers on your airspeed indicator climb in. Time to close the gap. Sometimes it works, for seconds. Often, you're simply chasing a blur that's already chosen not to fight you. Third attempt. Leapfrog the problem with jets and rockets. On paper, that solves everything. In practice, there aren't enough machines. The fuel is temperamental, the pilot's scarce, and the airfield's bigger targets than ever. Hunting a wooden ghost with a scarce wonder weapon is a strategy that looks brilliant on a blackboard and desperate in a briefing room. If you're keeping score at home, you might ask, where did this wooden racer actually bleed? The answer isn't glamorous. Not duels, not often. Mostly flak. Weighted arcs of metal from disciplined batteries that don't care how clean your aerodynamics are. Speed shortens exposure, but it doesn't erase it, and every low-level ingress gambles against a lucky burst. Crews knew it. They flew anyway. So why didn't this airplane take over the whole air war? Because wars aren't talent shows. They're logistics and doctrine with a soundtrack. Every airframe drank from the same well of engines, and those Merlins had to feed a lot of mouths. Single-seat fighters earning air superiority, four-engine heavies hauling entire neighborhoods' worth of ordnance, long-range escorts that turn daylight into something survivable. A scalpel doesn't replace a hammer in a doctrine built around hammers. And geography matters. In hot, humid climates, glue joints got grumpy. Wood moves, resin ages, sunlight wins arguments you didn't plan to have. Europe was the natural stage for a wooden sprinter. Elsewhere, the maintenance tail wagged too hard. Yet for the jobs carved out for it, precision, speed, audacity, it was unmatched. Think of the sheer range of verbs attached to its name. Scout, strike, harass, escort, intrude, interdict, photograph, rescue. An air force needs all of those words. This machine wore them like a wardrobe. Let me throw a challenge to the history buffs watching. Pick one mission that you believe distills everything remarkable about this aircraft into a single sortie. Was it the capital city daytime taunt? The prison break? A night spent circling an enemy base, counting landing lights and making them wink out? Or a maritime ambush where 8 rockets rewrote the balance sheet of a convoy? Put your choice and your case in the comments. I'll pin the best arguments so everyone can weigh it. As the war ground forward, the legend only grew because the pattern didn't change. The wooden wonder kept arriving where it shouldn't, at speeds it shouldn't, carrying loads it shouldn't, and leaving before anyone had a satisfying answer. Its loss rates on many missions stayed so low that commanders who once mocked it began to measure risk in a new way, not by how many guns you bolted on, but by how fast you finished the job and how little time you gave the enemy to react. That's a doctrinal shift you can trace on a map, in briefing notes, and in the way radio operators learned to hold their breath when someone said, "Stand by, fast movers inbound." And we still haven't hit the final turn, because beyond the famous raids and the humiliations handed out in daylight, there's an epilogue that says as much about the design as any wartime headline. When jets took the center stage and pistons became antiques overnight, the wooden racer didn't vanish with a bow. It kept flying, finishing the jobs that still needed doing. In jungles where the enemy hugged the canopy and surprise mattered more than mock numbers. The dates on those last combat reports might surprise you. We'll land there, on that unexpected post-war chapter, on how many were built, and on the quiet reasons the story slipped into the shadows of bigger, noisier legends. At the end, before we do, I want your take. Is speed the most underrated form of protection in World War II aviation? Or is it simply the part of the story we forget because it doesn't photograph as well as turrets and armor plate? Tap out your argument below. And if you're still with me at this point, you're exactly the kind of viewer this channel was built for. So stay strapped in. The last act of this story delivers the biggest lesson, and it's the one you'll be quoting next time someone tells you wood and glue can't win a war. Here's the landing you were promised. The quiet epilogue that explains how a wooden sprinter could terrify an empire, then slip into the footnotes while louder legends hog the spotlight. Start with the numbers. In the space of a single decade, nearly 8,000 airframes took shape from layered veneers and clever glues, rolling out of places that once tuned pianos and carved wardrobes. That army of craftsmen didn't just build airplanes. They turned a nation's fine motor skills into a strategic resource. The result was a fleet that could scout, strike, and vanish with a statistical stubbornness commanders loved. On many sorties, loss rates hovered so low they looked like rounding errors, not magic, just math born from speed. And the flying didn't stop with victory parades. As jets shouldered their way into center stage, the wooden wonder kept finding work where agility and precision still mattered more than top speed. Humid jungles, low-level strikes, the kind of missions where a fast, hard-hitting two-seater could do in minutes what a larger force might fumble for hours. If you've ever read those late reports from the tropics, you know the names and dates that prove the point. Propellers still solving problems in a world that had fallen in love with swept wings. So why didn't it become the universal answer? Because wars run on factories and doctrine, not just brilliance. The same Merlin engines it loved were the coin of the realm, needed by fighters and heavies alike. The climate could be a traitor. Wood and resin behave differently under tropical punishment than they do in cool European air, and strategic culture matters. Some commands were married to mass bombing, steel avalanches at night, where a fast scalpel, however dazzling, was never going to replace the hammer. But here's the part that belongs at the very end, because it's the piece the skeptics never saw coming. The enemies who mocked it tried to mirror it, built lookalikes, brewed special glues, bolted exotic boosters to their hot rods, even leapt ahead to jets and rockets. And when the dust settled, the most expensive, most exotic counters still had to answer a maddeningly simple question. Can you be in the right place at the right second every time? Across an entire continent? The wooden answer was yes, often enough to matter. The metal answers, for all their thunder, rarely were. That's the lesson I want you to take with you. Pick a single ruthless idea, speed as armor, and build every choice around it. Strip away what doesn't serve it. Use the materials your enemy underestimates. Spread production so wide they can't bomb at all. Then keep your promises in the air, mission after mission, until even your critics start measuring success the way you do. Now it's your turn. In the comments, tell me the one sortie that, to you, captures everything remarkable about this machine. The daylight taunt in the enemy's capital, the prison walls punched open with surgical bombing, the night intruder that turned approach patterns into trapdoors, or the sea strike where 8 rockets rewrote a convoy's fate. Make your case. Argue with me. I'll pin the sharpest takes so everyone sees it first. If this story made you rethink what protection looks like in the air, if it surprised you that wood, glue, and nerve could humiliate cutting-edge metal, tap like, share this with the biggest aviation skeptic you know, and subscribe. We do deep dives like this every week, and I don't want you missing the next time a so-called impossible idea rewrites the rules. And hey, drop "Wooden Wonder" in your comment so I know you made it to the end. And here's the detail that makes the whole philosophy click. That smooth, rivetless skin wasn't just pretty. It was the reason the air stayed attached, the drag stayed down, and the speed stayed up. 2 laminated fuselage shells glued along a seam like a giant model kit. Furniture-grade craftsmanship baked into combat geometry. The result was an airplane that punished sloppy aerodynamics in everything chasing it. You could almost hear the air whisper, "Keep up if you can." Inside the bay, versatility lived. Long legs, 2,000 pounds, and the range to make it count. Short, savage dashes, double that. Yes, even the infamous 4,000-pound cookie that normally demanded a big 4-engine brute. Imagine the look on a flak crew's face when a slender, 2-man racer arrives carrying the same wallop they expected from a lumbering fortress. That cognitive dissonance was part of the weapon. Up front, The nose gun solved a problem pilots had wrestled with since wing guns were first spaced across airfoils. No more guessing a perfect convergence distance under fire. For Hispano, cannons in the belly. For rifle-caliber Brownings above. One tight, centerline stream. Squeeze the trigger and pour out roughly 1,000 rounds per minute in cannon shells plus 5,000 in machine gun fire. The speed penalty? A measly 10 to 15 miles an hour. That's the sort of engineering trade you frame on a wall. Production was its own quiet miracle. With jigs and molds set, piano shops and furniture factories turned into precision suppliers, their craftsmen trading chisels for calipers. At the peak, you could mark days by completed airframes. One wouldn't wonder every single day. Rolling out despite bombers overhead and ration books on every table. It wasn't just mass production. It was a distributed bet that skill could stand in for heavy industry when heavy industry was already working flat out. In the field, the statistics started to whisper a message commanders couldn't ignore. On mission profiles tuned to its strengths, loss rates dipped to the kind of numbers that make planners double-check the math. Under 1% on some runs, the sort of survivability you usually only hear about in training flights or propaganda. Not invincibility, never that, but a new way of thinking about risk, exposure, time, not armor thickness. Daylight swagger became a tactic in itself. The wooden intruders didn't have to level cities to win. They chose moments that mattered. Anniversaries, broadcasts, headquarters full of men who believed timing protected them. One low, fast attack at exactly the wrong second did more to bruise a regime's confidence than 1,000 tons of bombs dropped at midnight. Pride hates a stopwatch. Night was no refuge. Intruder crews turned the glide path home into a kill zone, waiting where pilots felt safest, at the lip of their own runways. In those minutes, even the finest fighter is just a lantern on rails, slow and predictable. One slashing pass, and the pattern unraveled. Fires on the grass, wrecks at the threshold, commanders staring at maps and wondering where their secure airspace went. Over water, the playbook added pages. 8 underwing rockets meant a convoy's insurance policy no longer fit on paper. A single ripple, and the arithmetic of tonnage turned to smoke. And if a periscope betrayed a submerged enemy, the bay could drop depth charges with the sort of precision only speed allows. On target before the alarm finishes climbing a ladder of shouts. For the boldest crews, the 57mm nose gun variant made the sea a dueling ground. One shot, one punctured hull, one rapid fade to the deep. Limitations? Of course, no machine cheats physics for free. Tropical heat and humidity could bully wood and glue into stubborn moods. And the same Merlin engines that made the airplane sing were wanted by every other star in the Allied lineup. Doctrine, too, draws hard lines. Commands built around mass night bombing will always reach for the sledgehammer first, even when a scalpel sits ready on the bench. But none of that erases what the wooden sprinter did where it fit. The surgical strikes, the reconnaissance that fed entire campaigns, the audacity that kept an enemy guessing. And yes, the enemy guessed wrong often enough to try imitation. A fast twin of their own, bonded plywood and special adhesives, rolled out with high hopes, and rolled straight into the realities of wartime supply. Destroy the glue plant, and you don't just slow production. You cripple the entire idea. Substitute chemistry. And prototypes come apart in the worst possible way, even when jets entered the story with speed to spare. They were too few, too late, too stretched. You can't be everywhere at once with miracles. You can be in the right place often with a machine that drinks regular fuel and loves the low road. What sticks with me, what I want you to argue about in the comments, is the mindset. Pick a single, ruthless principle and let it dictate everything. Here, it was speed as armor. That meant what if wood was smoother. It meant no turrets if turrets slowed you down. It meant guns only where they didn't drag. It meant trusting craftsmen more than presses and trusting pilots to thread needles at treetop height. That philosophy didn't just build an airplane. It built a habit of winning seconds, and seconds win wars. So tell me this. If you had to choose one configuration to fly, blue-painted photo ship stalking at altitude, nose-gun brawler for trains and airfields, rocket-armed sea striker, or the 57mm big stick sub-hunter, which one would you sign for, and why? Paint your mission. Sell me on your loadout. I'll pin the pitch that makes me reach for a flight suit. If this deep dive gave you a fresh respect for what wood, glue, and nerve can do when they're shaped by a clear idea, tap like, share this with the biggest skeptic in your group, and make sure you're subscribed. New episodes every week, and the next one is going to challenge another assumption you didn't know you had. Ring the bell so you don't miss it. And drop speed is armor in your comment so I can find the real ones who stayed to the end. Let's pull the camera in even closer, right into the workshop where the legend started. Picture a country house turned skunkworks, windows taped in X's, sawdust drifting in sunbeams while men in overalls and women in headscarves lay thin veneers into curved molds. Glue brushes whisper along the grain. Clamps bite down. The shell of a fuselage takes shape like a violin body for an orchestra that plays at 400 miles an hour. A foreman runs a hand over the skin, searching for a flaw his eye already caught. None. That panel will meet its twin. Down a center seam as neat as a tailor's stitch. This isn't quaint. It's war-winning quality control disguised as craft. On the flight line, the contrast is almost comic. A slender, almost delicate outline. And then those engines fire. The air thrums. Prop discs blur. The wooden skin comes alive with a high, eager hum. Wheels lift, doors tuck in, and the world below becomes a scrolling map. The navigator calls headings in a voice as level as a kitchen scale. Turn now. Drop in 5. Home in 40. This is what speed buys. Time sliced so thin, even flak has trouble threading it. The aircraft's favorite trick remains timing. Hit a radio house not at night, not at random, but exactly when the microphone's warm and the speechwriters hold their breath. Strike a prison wall not where cells will shatter, but where a breach turns keys into rumors and rumors into stampedes. Lurk near a runway not when the pattern is crowded and alert, but when the first landers arrive, nerves down, fuel low. Every mission is a thesis about seconds, and this machine earns an A by leaving before the enemy finds their pen. Even the way it fights feels like a manifesto. Nose guns centered, recoil shrugging straight along the fuselage, tracers threading a single needle. No wing wobble, no cross-your-fingers convergence. You aim with the airplane itself, like pointing a rapier rather than swinging a club. Pilots describe the first burst as a revelation. Targets don't so much explode as surrender their shapes. When the enemy tries to answer with a copy, the lesson about systems thinking lands hard. You can sketch the lines, match the dimensions, even steal the nickname. But if your adhesive plant is rubble and your chemistry is a compromise, your replica is a rumor with wings. One prototype peels apart, a test pilot doesn't go home, and the project that was supposed to erase a humiliation becomes a new one. Jet fighters do finally arrive with the kind of speed no piston prop can match. On paper, that's checkmate. In practice, it's a chessboard with missing pieces. Fuel shortages, green pilots, sparse squadrons, airstrips that scream their locations to every reconnaissance camera. A wooden sprinter doesn't duel a jet. It makes dueling irrelevant by choosing where not to be. The jet is a saber. The wooden wonder is a rumor with teeth. Ask crews where they felt most mortal and they'll point not to enemy aces, but to flak belts and blind corners. Speed shortens risk. It never deletes it. Every low-level run is a bargain with hedges and chimneys and the one unseen cable waiting to flick a tailplane. Every intruder circuit is a dance among lights and guesswork, where the black silhouette that just grew in your windscreen might be a returning friend or a foe with the same idea. Bravery here isn't swagger. It's calm discipline painted over adrenaline. And when the war ends, the airplane that shouldn't have worked refuses to vanish on cue. It finds new jungles, new rails, new coastal lanes where speed and precision still beat mass. The dates on those final combat reports read like footnotes to history, but they carry the same signature: low, fast, decisive. So what should we actually take from all this, beyond a well-earned grin at a wooden machine dunking on the era's steel idols? Here's my vote. First, constraints aren't shackles. They're guides. Short on metal? Use wood. Need speed? Sand the drag down to silence. Need distributed production? Teach piano makers to read airframe blueprints. Second, pick one principle and let it be ruthless. Speed is armor, meant no turrets, no fashion, no guilt about ignoring traditions. Third, excellence at scale is a national superpower. 1,000 careful hands, each perfecting a small step, can outfly a factory that brags louder. If you've watched this far, you're the kind of mind I want in the comments. Tell me which role you'd have flown and why. The sky blue photo ship that brought entire campaigns into focus, the nosegun raider that turned rail lines into scrap, the night intruder that made home field a myth, or the sea striker that wrote the last line for more than one ship and sub. Sell your choice. Paint the sortie. Convince me. And if the idea that wood, glue, and audacity can bankrupt arrogance gave you the same chill it gave me, here's the mission you can fly for this channel. Hit like so the algorithm doesn't outrun us. Subscribe so you're on the roster for the next deep dive, and ring that bell so timing is on our side. Drop wooden wonder or speed is armor in your comment so I can find the true believers and shout you out in the next episode. Description: dive into the unbelievable story of the Havilland Mosquito, the wooden wonder that turned plywood, glue, and raw speed into one of WWII's most feared multi-role aircraft. From low-level daylight strikes over Berlin to the audacious prison-busting Operation Jericho, night fighter intruder hunts, anti-shipping rocket runs, and the 57mm Tsetse sub-killer variant. This is the warplane that frustrated the Luftwaffe, dodged interceptors, and proved that speed could be armored. In this video, you'll see how the Mosquito outpaced cutting-edge fighters, why its loss rates on some raids fell below 1%, how furniture makers and piano shops helped build it, and why German copycats like the Ta-154 never matched its lethal mix of precision and pace. Watch to the end for the mission that humiliated Nazi propaganda in broad daylight. And tell us in the comments, was the Mosquito the most effective Allied aircraft per crew in World War II? If you love aviation history and wild, true World War II stories, smash like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Comment, speed is armor. If you made it to the end,